Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Coming up, the United States and Iran agree on roadmap for final deal and a plan to end military hostilities in Lebanon. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announces resignation. China imposes trade curbs on dozens of U.S. firms in retaliation for Pentagon trade blacklist. U.S. deploys mid-range missile system to Japan for joint exercises. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. First up, the U.S.-Iran talks in Switzerland have made progress, including a mechanism on further technical negotiations. A statement by key mediators Qatar and Pakistan says all sides have agreed to set up a high-level committee to oversee progress. It says the committee has a roadmap regarding reaching a final deal within 60 days. The mediators will also form a group to help bring an end to military hostilities in Lebanon. Technical talks will continue in Switzerland over the course of this week. Iran's foreign ministry says negotiators discussed the issues, including permits to sell Iranian oil and unfreezing assets. And in the meantime, China's foreign ministry said on Monday that Beijing hopes that the United States and Iran will maintain the momentum of negotiations, continue to move in the same direction, and strive for further progress in the negotiations. So joining us now on the line is Dr. Wang Jing, a Middle East affairs expert. So thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Wang.
It's my great pleasure.
So first of all, what do you make of the symbolic meaning of establishing a high-level committee?
I think actually it means a lot, majorly from two dimensions. First of all, on the one hand, it means the starting point of the ceasefire deal, because we know one of the important things that is that on this meeting is that both the United States and Iran should start the negotiation process and finalize the ceasefire status through the very text ceremony. So when we are talking about the establishment of the high-level committee, we mean that actually the negotiation process is started. It also means that the ceasefire status has been finalized. So it's a very positive news. And also on the other hand, I think it's very major positive condition for the future implementation of the ceasefire consensus, and also the starting and encouragement of the negotiation process. We have to know that for many conflicting parties, it is usually very difficult to establish the trust again between them. So that's why they need the guarantee for security, the guarantee for the implementation of the negotiation process, the guarantee for the encouraging different parties to sit down again with each other. And so that's why the high-level committee established means that now we have the very preliminary guarantee mechanism. And this mechanism, I think, for sure in the future will help the related parties to establish the further stronger trust with each other, which could pave the way for the better understanding and more peaceful opportunities in this region.
Yeah, indeed. So, Dr. Wang, if we take a look at this deconfliction cell to be established between the United States, Iran, and Lebanon to ensure full termination of military hostilities in Lebanon, of course, the elephant in the room, Israel, is not involved here. So, are you confident that there will be real termination of military hostilities in Lebanon?
I don't think when we're talking about the real end of the hostilities, of course, it's impossible because Israel does not trust Hezbollah. Hezbollah does not trust Israel, and Israel would be supported to some extent by the United States, and of course, Hezbollah will be supported by Iran and its allies in this region. So these hostilities cannot end. But we're talking about the suspension of the hostilities, the suspension of the war, suspension of the killing by each other in this region. Particularly, we have to face a much more sensitive topic, that is what role should Israel play in southern Lebanon. Israel has a right to continue its military presence in southern Lebanon, or Israel has to give up its military presence in the southern Lebanon and withdraw its military forces within the timeline set by United States and Iran. So as you mentioned, it's correct. Israel is not on the negotiation table, but Israel is a very major part of the conflicting scenario. So that's why I think United States, Iran has to do something to take the interest of Israel inside consideration, and also take the interest of Hezbollah and the Lebanese people into the consideration, and find a solution that could benefit both of them.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says the newly established deconfliction mechanism in Lebanon will be the first real test of the agreement. What is your take in this regard? What do you think this might suggest?
Well, I think we have to know that a lot of the barrier, a lot of the obstacles preventing the reestablishment of the trust between the United States and Iran, and also a lot of things needs to be done to encourage both sides to reestablish trust again. Because we're talking about two conflicting parties who suffering the crisis and hostilities, and particularly the high intensified wars, which has already lasted for months. And then they have to go back to the negotiation table to end the hostilities within one day. That's of course impossible. But with now, I think United States and Iran faces the opportunities. They could face the opportunities of not only to end the war, but also to reestablish the kind of a new mechanism that could end economic difficulties to some extent inside Iran, and also could help alleviate this kind of the worries in some regional countries as well as the United States towards the topic of Iranian's nuclear issue. So that's why I think we have to know that we are facing opportunities. Of course, how to end the state of the Hormuz, how to end the divisions over the Iranian nuclear issue will be difficult. But actually, I think we're facing new opportunities which would benefit everybody.
With regard to other issues, such as, for example, waivers for Iran's oil and petrochemical exports, the lifting of the U.S. blockade on Iranian ports, the release of some frozen Iranian assets, and the launch of a reconstruction and development plan for Iran, how do you think they are likely to proceed?
I think these topics are very core concerns for both the United States and Iran, of course, separately. For United States, they concerned very closely about the state of the Hormuz immediately, and also the concern about the Iranian nuclear issue and how to define the so-called high level of uranium. These are the things the United States concerned very closely and watch very closely. But from the perspective of Iran, they believe they actually closely watch whether or not the United States could raise the assets inside the United States or in neighboring countries, or whether or not Iran could get the funds for the reconstruction process at their home, supported by United States or its allies. So actually, when we're talking about these topics, actually it means that the United States and Iran, their negotiation process is not based upon the empty words. It actually started to touch something most difficult, but something very important to each other. So that's why I think it could be understood as a very positive beginning and a positive sign that both the United States and Iran now face opportunities to not only to end the hostilities temporarily, but also try to overcome the difficulties and obstacles for themselves to establish a much more positive relationship mechanism in the future.
For example, there is to be a so-called reconstruction fund for Iran worth about like $300 billion US, if my memory is correct. But in the meantime, it seems a message from the U.S. that we have heard recently is that the United States is not necessarily required to contribute financially to this planned fund. So how do you think the final mechanism, so to speak, for this planned fund is going to work?
Well, I think when we're talking about the final mechanism,
Yeah,
we talked about the mechanism that could help settle a lot of things, a
yeah.
lot of the topics that are very sensitive, a lot of topics that actually catch the tension, both the United States and Iran. So that means that on the one hand, this mechanism should work, bring both the United States and Iran back to the negotiation table firmly, rather than temporarily. So it means that they have to help them reestablish connections and based upon their trust. And second is that this mechanism help to find a kind of solution to different issues, such as you mentioned, Iran nuclear deal, Iran nuclear issue, state of the hormones, and how to restart the investment and economic construction inside Iran. These are things very difficult. So we need a comprehensive vision rather than the temporary and partial vision. And last but not least, I think we're talking about a mechanism. The mechanism should be supported by everybody. For example, when we're talking about the mechanism now, it's good enough, but it does not mean that everybody is included. Israel's role, to some extent, now is marginalized, and Hezbollah and the Lebanese people's demands now has been marginalized too. So how to take their interest into consideration, how to understand their voices. So this is the other sensitive topic. So the mechanism right now is good. It's actually the good starting point, and everybody is trying to establish a kind of new mechanism, but I don't think it's enough. We still need patience and we still need time.
By the way, do you think Washington will go back to using military means if sometime in the future, if one day its negotiations with Tehran hits a bottleneck?
I don't think it's very likely, but we cannot deny the possibilities because actually it depends upon the United States' own decision makers. So we are not the United States leaders, so we don't know how they think. But we hope that these possibilities could be denied. But as you mentioned, that when we talk about the possibilities of coming back to the war, would mean that the hostility will return and the mechanism for negotiation fail. So when we look at what is happening now and what might happen within the next 60 days, of course, we cannot deny the possibilities because the division between the United States and Iran over Iran nuclear issue, over the state of hormones, over the economic construction, over the releasing of the frozen assets inside the United States and other neighboring countries are still very apparent. So we cannot deny the possibilities. But as we say again, that the United States and Iran now they have the motivation to come back to the negotiation table, and now they have the mechanism facilitating the dialogue. So I think we should cautiously be positive about the future success of the negotiation. And I think although they will face many difficulties, we should continue to encourage the dialogue, which could lead to possible breakthroughs that would benefit both the United States, Iran, and everybody.
Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Wang Jing, a Middle East expert. Coming up, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announces resignation. This is World Today. Stay tuned. You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced that he is resigning from his post as the leader of the ruling Labour Party. This will also see him replaced as the country's national leader, namely the Prime Minister. Starmer has been under mounting pressure to resign for weeks. His decision came after a political competitor from within his own party, former Manchester City Mayor Andy Burnham, made it clear that he would challenge Keir Starmer for his job. It also came less than 2 months after Labour Party suffered a defeat in a round of local elections in Britain. So for more, joining us now on the line is Dr. Joseph Siracusa, Professor of Global Futures with Curtin University. Thank you very much for joining us. So, first of all, why do you think Starmer has come to a point where he can no longer resist this kind of political pressure calling on him to resign?
Well, he doesn't have the numbers. I mean, keep in mind here that the Labour Party has 403 seats in the British Parliament, and the Parliamentary Labour Party has had enough of their leader. I mean, they don't see that he's competent to win the next election. He has failed on a number of his policies. They have identified him with a weaker position vis-a-vis Europe and foreign policy and the like. And it's time for him to go. I mean, this is extraordinary. He'd be the sixth prime minister to resign since 2016. And it's, it's sort of like the opinion polls have determined who the next leader is going to be. Anyway, Starmer, who was a very pragmatic type fellow, not particularly flamboyant or anything like that, made a series of mistakes, and his enemies have pounced on him. Keep it in mind that in the parliamentary system, as in the United States Senate and Congress, I mean, it's the numbers. As soon as you have the numbers, you have to go. I mean, that's how it works. And the Parliamentary Labour Party has simply abandoned the Prime Minister of Britain. So he's going to be replaced probably by that former mayor, as you mentioned, from of Manchester, who's just won a seat, and he's sort of on the soft left, whereas Starmer was more on the soft right of the Labour Party, and so he'll try to replace him, and people will try to win the next election. Here's a man who had this enormous majority and couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And after a couple of years, less than 2 years, the Labour Party is turfing him out. So once again, we're talking about the tyranny of numbers, and Keir Starmer ran out of luck.
Now, Professor, let me ask you this. Starmer says that under his tenure, Britain's reputation in the world had been restored, with investment secured, and improvements in workers' rights delivered. What is your take on this? In what aspects do you think we should give Starmer certain credits for leading Britain?
Well, he tried to right a number of wrongs with elder people and with social justice and that kind of thing, and he's done a pretty good job there. He did renege on fuel resources for elderly people. He said they would get more, and then he gave them less, as a matter of fact. So he reneged on that, and so that hasn't worked out. But it's his negative things that have overwhelmed the smaller things that he has achieved. I mean, it's his appointment of Peter Mandelson as the ambassador to the United States, for example. His inability to deal with Donald Trump on the international stage, and the British military is in terrible shape. The army needs help, the Navy needs ships, the Air Force needs planes, and it's in sort of like disrepair. And to tell you the truth, the way I see it, maybe others too, is that Britain has not found its place since its decision to exit the European Union. So the last 6 prime ministers are really dealing with the impact, the political implications, economic implications of the Brexit vote in 2016.
So, like you mentioned, Professor, one thing in particular that has really damaged the reputation of Starmer is his appointment of Peter Mandelson, an associate of the convicted American sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, as London's ambassador to Washington. In this particular case, do you think it is fair to entirely, absolutely blame Starmer? Hello, Professor?
Well, I don't blame Starmer in the sense that he supported him, Mendelsohn. What Starmer failed to do was to take on the contrary views of Mendelsohn. He just didn't look into it properly. It looks like he got lazy about the paperwork and vetting this particular fellow. Now, Mendelsohn was bad news from beginning to end. A number of people already suspected that. But, the Starmer counted on his advisors around him to get it right. He didn't do it himself, and this is his, I think, his failure to deal with details, which is also indicative of his other faults. As a matter of fact, he's not a classical politician poring over all these documents and arguments. He simply took the advice of some people that Mendelssohn was okay, and of course, Mendelssohn clearly was not okay.
So is Andy Burnham on course to become the next prime minister for sure?
I believe he will. I think there's going to be a decision by the Labour Party. The names will have to be registered by July 9th. Now, you need 80 members of parliament to get on that list of people as potential. And of course, there are 403 members. He has the support of 300. So I think it'll be uncontested, and we'll probably get a new prime minister before the sitting of parliament in September. So that'll work pretty well. But in the meantime, Starmer's in control of Britain. He'll remain the prime minister until the new fellow takes over. So he's got that going for him, and he's sort of polishing or burnishing his legacy right now. He wants people to remember him as a supporter of people who are down and out, or what they call in Australia the battlers, people who try very hard to make a living and afford medicine and all that. And there are certain things he couldn't do for these people. Maybe Burnham can. There are these terrible waiting lists in Britain for surgery and the like, and the national insurance program doesn't work so well, and it's broken down in a number of areas. So he set himself these tasks of trying to solve these things. He couldn't do it; it's just too big.
Yeah.
And of course, if you can't win elections, your party doesn't want you. But as I say, the point that I'd like to make tonight is that Britain is being ruled by public opinion, by these polls. I mean, the polls show that he can't win an election, and he can't help other people win an election. So the Labour Party, the Parliamentary Labour Party, has simply abandoned him.
Yeah. So I guess this is one point you made earlier, Professor. I mean, by the time when the next prime minister takes office, Britain will face its seventh national leader in about a decade. What do you think this tells us about the status quo of British politics today? I mean, Starmer has been in office for only 2 years. That's pretty short. And I guess for any leader's policy, his political agenda to take effect, it takes time. Common sense tells us that it will take time. So do you think the politics in this country have lost a key condition to pursue real, meaningful reforms that can be beneficial for the country's economy and society over the long term?
I think you're right. I mean, he came to office, he rode to office on an overwhelming mandate. And in these 2 years, he wasn't able to deliver on that mandate. He should have been able to do anything he wanted, but he couldn't get a buy-in from everybody else. So they see him as a failure in that sense. But I think we're dealing with the chaos that was created by the Brexit exit. Britain had a more growth and investment with its connections with Europe. And the other thing this is too, when Britain left the European Union, a number of the European Union members, who are all, by the way, members of NATO, came to trust Britain less and less. I was at some conferences in Europe after Brexit, and they just started to see the United Kingdom as an unreliable partner in NATO because it had left the European Union, all of whom, pretty much, are members of NATO too. So they saw that as sort of a betrayal. In many ways, becoming the Prime Minister of Britain is a poisoned chalice. I mean, the Prime Minister is trying to do things that were upset, or that were put in train by the decision to leave the European Union, which provided Britain with more investment, greater trade, and all the rest of it. And they don't really know what to put in its place.
Yeah.
Now, Britain has gone down in terms of what it's able to do.
This is really a difficult task. I get your point. But thank you very much for joining us, Professor Joseph Siracusa, joining us from Curtin University. We'll be back after a short break. You're back with World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. China has imposed new trade restrictions on dozens of U.S. entities in response to Washington's move to add more Chinese corporations to a Pentagon blacklist. China's Ministry of Commerce on Monday placed 10 American entities on an export control list. It has also prohibited government procurement agencies from buying products manufactured by 46 U.S. companies. The ministry says the move aims to safeguard national security and fulfill international obligations related to non-proliferation. Earlier this month, the Pentagon added a slew of Chinese corporations to a list of entities that it claimed have aided China's military. Alibaba, Baidu, and BYD were among the latest additions in this particular Pentagon list. So for more, joining us now on the line is Professor Jiang Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks.
So first of all, is China justified to roll out the latest countermeasures? Some say Beijing's countermeasures are a largely symbolic gesture rather than a substantive escalation in terms of China-U.S. relations. Do you agree?
Well, I totally disagree with that. I think, China is doing this, Chinese government is doing this in retaliation to putting, Alibaba, BYD on this entity list related to U.S. defense purposes. I think it's not justified. If you look at, companies operation like Alibaba and BYD, they're clearly commercial companies. I mean, I would say 99.99% of the business is very much tied to commercial civilian markets. BYD is a seller of vehicles, passenger cars, SUVs. They might have some, maybe here and there, they might have something to do with defense applications directly or indirectly, but an overwhelming percentage of their business is tied to civilian markets. And you look at the list put out by China's Ministry of Commerce. I just look at the list, these 10 companies. I mean, they are all very much tied to defense applications, and there are two companies that are may not be directly tied to defense applications, but related to rare earth. Clearly, these are companies charged with the task of essentially bypassing China's supply of rare earth materials in that space. So other than these two companies, the rest of 8 companies are strictly, overwhelmingly, openly stating they're defense companies, basically. So I think there's a sea of difference between the entity list provided by the two governments. On one hand, it's sort of a very tenuous connection to defense applications, and in that case, it's clearly directly related to defense applications.
Talking about the so-called blacklist from the Pentagon, do you think this allegation that these Chinese companies have aided the Chinese military is based on a legitimate concern?
That we don't know. I mean, I can imagine a case that might happen. Some procurement organizations related to China's defense organizations put out a procurement request to buy maybe a few electric cars, right? And BYD probably responded to that request, and they sold some cars. I mean, that could be a possibility. But if you look at, I mean, I think we have to put things into perspective. If you look at BYD as a company, right? It's like General Motors, right? I mean, it's like a Ford Motor Company. I mean, I think the idea that BYD is somehow related to defense industry, it is a very, very tenuous acquisition. I think it doesn't hold much water, even if it may have some revenues associated with that. But I mean, look at the overwhelming business. I mean, they are in the business of selling cars, right? So I think it's a very tenuous acquisition.
Yeah. Many Chinese companies actually dispute. I mean, many Chinese companies in this Pentagon list, they dispute this designation. And previously, Chinese smartphone maker Xiaomi actually once won a court challenge in the United States that resulted in Xiaomi being removed from that blacklist. That was in May 2021. Yeah. So realistically, do you think Alibaba, Baidu, and BYD today have the same legal leverage in U.S. courts?
Well, I think I don't know. I think it was trying though. I think I think the political environment in today's America is quite different from America in 2021. But overall, I think American courts are sort of impartial, and they claim to deliver justice. So I think it's worth trying. But just by looking at the public information that we have, it's very difficult to connect companies like Xiaomi, like BYD, like Alibaba to the defense industry, right? It just challenges common sense. So I think it's a very different situation.
So in a bigger picture sense, Professor, do you think the latest development we are talking about here is a sign that a tech war between China and the United States is likely to continue despite efforts to keep the broader relationship relatively stable?
Yeah, well, I mean, in an overall big picture, the Chinese government and the Trump administration have reached an agreement to establish a strategic, stable relationship, right? I think the relationship is pretty much stabilized. But the thing is, on the American side, there are always those people who are very much bent on essentially derailing, this direction of development between the two countries' bilateral relationship. I would argue that there are a lot of people in the deep state in Washington, particularly those people related to the defense industry, related to the intelligence community, related to other related fields that have been spending the last 30 years trying to essentially fight China. I mean, their entire mission, their entire career is tied to somehow fighting China. And President Trump has a very different China policy. And I think, these people are at a loss right now. These people don't want to give up their fight. And they will probably do everything possible to sabotage, the current relationship, the stabilized relationship between the two countries, to sabotage President Trump's foreign policy agenda with respect to China. So I think, something like this came out of the Commerce Department in the United States, from the Pentagon, from other organizations. This is something not surprising to me. I mean, there are those people who like to do things like this, and I'm not sure these decisions have already gone to the top of the White House. That we don't know. But nevertheless, I think China has to respond, and that's why we have this list come from the
this
Commerce
countermeasure,
Ministry.
right? Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much for joining us. Professor Zhang Gong joining us from the University of International Business and Economics. You are listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. China's business chamber in the European Union has raised concerns over the EU's proposed Industrial Accelerator Act. It warns that some provisions could undermine investment and industrial cooperation. The chamber says restrictions regarding public procurement, foreign investment, and localization requirements could increase costs, reduce efficiency, and weaken global supply chains. The EU released the Industrial Accelerator Act in March, setting out restrictive provisions for foreign investment. So for more, my colleague Zhao Yang spoke with Dr. Zhou Mi, joining us from the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation.
So, Dr. Zhou Mi, thank you very much for joining us. The China Chamber of Commerce to the EU argues that the EU Industrial Accelerator Act could have counterproductive effects. So what exactly is the EU trying to achieve with this legislation?
Well, in my understanding that the EU is trying to improve its abilities on some of its manufacturing, especially for some of the new energy vehicles or related industries. I think that is a kind of a very important target for EU. They want to have a better abilities, especially when the time as when EU is trying to fulfill its commitment on the climate change agreement. So they want to improve their abilities on the vehicles, especially for the new energy vehicles, because we know that the EU is able to produce the traditional vehicles like the Germany and France. They are having very strong abilities in the vehicles, in the traditional vehicles. So when they are going to move on to step into a new era, they also want to improve their ability in such kind of areas. They want to use this legislation to support the development of these local businesses on these supply chains. It's not only about just the final products of the automobiles, but also, in my understanding, they also want to strengthen their abilities in the global market. So they want to supply the local consumers with a better products, while at the same time to also to stay in the similar phase like what they have been in the traditional vehicles in the global market.
And is this proposal primarily about boosting European industrial competitiveness, or is it also a part of a broader effort to reduce Europe's dependence on China?
Well, I think that for some of these proposers of this legislation, they really want to improve their abilities, like what we have heard from the line about their kind of worries about over-dependence, so-called over-dependence on the global market. I think that maybe it has not put it in very straight way, not that China is what they are really worried about, but I think that from the facts about the international trade, I think that the import from China are really a big part of this EU's import. So I really believe that what they are talking about, the over dependence, they are really worrying about their import from China. Among all these manufacturing products, I think that the EVs or some of these new energy vehicles, green products are playing an important role, because it's not only about to supply the EU market or consumers with what they have been having from China, but they are really creating some new space on the cooperation, on the development. So this are really a big worry from them. But I don't think that it's a kind of a normal one or a right thing to consider or to worry about the import from China, because when the consumers are able to have more choices, they are able to pick up what they really want to have from import. I think that is definitely what they are able to have a better welfare on the different kind of things. In this regard, I do believe that what they are really worrying about is have nonsense. They don't have to worry about that, because when they are doing that, they are really creating some barriers for the choices of the consumers, and also giving so many improper ways to support maybe the local companies in the wrong way.
And the China Chamber of Commerce argues that the EU's real challenge are high energy costs, labor shortage, and regulatory burdens. So is this act going to address the right problems? And do you think the restrictive provisions could constitute some significant investment barriers?
Well, I don't think that they're really able to deal with these factors, including the energy cost, the labor shortage. They're not trying to increase the supply of these things. The energy costs are based on the supply. Maybe they're not the lack of enough supply with its neighboring country, but they have to depend on the energies coming from very far away, like from United States. I don't think that is a good choice for them to further reduce the supply of these factors. And when you're talking about the labors, they are really not having enough people living in the EU because of the aging problems, because some of the attitudes towards immigrants. So when they are putting the more wars or kind of restrictions around its borders, the possible or the potential investors, they also worry about that, because when the companies are doing businesses, they have to consider about all the related cost issues, and without enough or affordable cost, even they are able to produce the cars, they are not able to sell them in a good price.
So Chinese companies have become major investors in Europe's EV, battery, and renewable energy sector. So how significant is their contribution to the Europe's green transition?
Well, as we said about the inflation in the EU is very high. So when they're trying to fulfill their commitment, I think that they really need some affordable and practical solutions. China's practices on the green energies, on the batteries, and also renewable energy on those sectors are very strong. I don't think that is based on only about the cost control. They are based on the a whole industrial or whole supply chain supported resolutions. Based on that practices, I think that China is the only one, not one of them. It is the only one who can provide the EU and other markets with affordable solutions, products, services, and I think that is really important when EU still trying to fulfill its commitment to transfer from the fossil fuels into the green energy.
And experts say the Industrial Accelerator Act ignores the reality of global supply chains. So what's your view on that, and how interconnected are European and Chinese manufacturing ecosystem today?
Well, if I want to use a word, I would say that the European manufacturing ecosystem is fragile. They are not able to produce all the things. I think that is naturally, and it's not a bad thing. Even in the globalization, we know that every country is depending on the import from other countries, and also depends on the export to other countries. Well, China is a little bit more sound or are more whole supply chains and industrial chains. So for the cooperation, both sides should try to pick up a right way for them to cooperate with each other instead of just trying to overstrength or overemphasize certain kind of barriers or factors.
And Dr. Zhou Mi, so why is the EU getting tough on trade and investment with China? And at a time when EU is facing economic headwinds and need more investment and innovation, what should the EU do at this particular moment?
Well, in my understanding, maybe some of the reasons are because that China is so kind to EU. We are having so many talk with EU, and when they are saying that they are facing some challenges, we are always willing to talk with them in a better way. So in this regard, it's not our kind of a real fact that reflect the relations between these two very major economies. Well, I think that although China are willingly to do more things to coordinate it with the counterpart, like from EU, we still want to make it a very reasonable basis for the globalization, because both China and the EU, we are the competitors to the global governance, like the WTO. We made it very clear in our accession, tables or file that we stick to the principles of the most favored nation. We will not discriminate the other member of WTO just because they are big or small, they are strong or weak. I think that is naturally what we have promises, and we need to do that. And for another reason is that both China and the EU, we regard it as regarded that when we're able to fulfill or to abide by the rules-based system, it's really important. When the companies are having to make the choices, they need to find the best or most suitable ways for coping with their trading partners instead of just have limited choices. So in this regard, I still believe that EU, when they are trying to declare something, no matter from the political reasons or other kind of reasons, it's not so wise for them to do that, because China has made it very clear that we will protect the enterprise's interests. We will try to fight against many of the interference from other governments. And we have better and better laws and regulations to protect the benefits of the enterprises from China.
Dr. Zhou Mi joining us from the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. China has once again urged Japan to reflect on its wartime history, reject militarism, and earn the trust of its neighbors. The remark came after Japan and the United States launched a large-scale joint military exercise over the past weekend. Meanwhile, a much larger U.S.-led military exercise is underway, with the United States deploying its Typhoon mid-range missile systems to Japan for joint exercises. For more, my colleague Xu Yawen spoke with Dr. Yang Xiyu from the China Institute of International Studies.
Dr. Yang, as we speak, two large-scale military drills are underway in the Pacific. One is Resolute Dragon, held by U.S. and Japan, while another is Valiant Shield, a U.S.-led multinational biennial drill covering Guam, Hawaii, as well as waters and airspace around Japan. So could you first elaborate on these two overlapping drills and their respective operational targets?
Let me put it this way. On the surface, the two separate military drills are unlinked in terms of its types, covering areas is totally different. But if you look at the whole picture, the two separate drills is really designed systematic actions. Let's look at the concrete picture. On the bilateral part, say the so-called Dragon part by U.S. and Japan bilaterally, it covers the west southern area of offshore islands of Japan, very close to the Taiwan island area. And the other, the so-called multilateral, is covering the so-called West Pacific area, exactly covering from the first island to the second island, the chains. If you put the two separate parts together, if you see the common or overlapped focus on the Taiwan island areas. And secondly, the two different types of military drills are designed to a combined military operation on the U.S.-Japan bilateral that is designed to strengthen the U.S.-Japan military actions targeting at close Taiwan area, and the other larger scale is a supporting part for the first one, and also targeting and the possible conflicts on the Taiwan. Especially in the military drills, they introduce the middle-range missile. It's very dangerous and sensitive to this region. So in short, such two separate drills are targeting to Taiwan Island area.
Dr. Yang, as you mentioned, for the first time, the U.S. military is deploying this mid-range Typhoon missile system to Kanoya Air Base in southern Japan. How does Japan justify allowing the deployment of such long-range, potentially offensive missile systems on its territory, given this pacifist constitution?
It's a very key question. That question reminds us of the other deployment of the Typhoon missile in Philippines. It's well known. The middle-range missile deployments used to be one of the major games between Soviet and the U.S. during the Cold War era. In other words, middle-range missile is a very dangerous and a key weapons in the Cold War games. And the Cold War has been over already. However, U.S. has been trying to introduce such a tool or weapon into the Pacific region. Last year, they temporarily introduced these tools in Philippines on behalf of the so-called military drills. This year, they repeat it again. Such repeating actions will gradually lead to a permanent deployment of such a dangerous weapon or tools in the West Pacific region. That is U.S. strategic goals. And as for Japan, as everyone knows now, they have determined to accelerate their remilitarization by introducing, no matter it's temporarily or permanently, such a dangerous tools that will strengthen Japan's remilitarization, that will strengthen Japan's military ties with the superpower of the United States. So such military drills, by introducing these dangerous tools, will trigger multidimensional risks, not only on Japan-U.S. military ties, but also for the region as a whole.
Dr. Yang, why do you think Japan has ramped up its participation in U.S.-led military exercises in recent years?
I think Japan has been trying to make their defensive-oriented forces going to overseas, but both domestically and internationally, Japanese military forces going to overseas is highly sensitive and dangerous. Therefore, the Japanese administration go a sly ways towards this goal of the going overseas by introducing military elements. Concretely speaking, they make good use of every American military actions for their goals. They are always active on U.S.-Japan military cooperation, not only for support U.S., but also by lending this cooperation to strengthen their momentum going to covering their dangerous moves going to overseas. Therefore, they are more and more active for the participating U.S. military cooperation for their own more and more active going overseas.
And then how concerned are you about those moves made by U.S. and Japan, deploying the missiles and increase their military drills in the Pacific? And also, what concrete steps will China take to safeguard regional peace and security? Because we have noticed that in response to their military drills, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson on Monday released a statement urging Japan to reflect on its wartime history and fully break away from militarism.
You are touching a very serious challenge facing the Asia-Pacific region, and also touching what should we do on this U.S.-Japan moves. Firstly, U.S.-Japan, such a series of actions of the so-called cooperations by U.S. and Japan, focusing on Taiwan Island area and the West Pacific region, trigger a very dangerous gambling game for this region, because U.S., the more military cooperation between the two countries, the more active Japanese participation of U.S. Pacific strategy means the faster acceleration of the remilitarization of Japan. That will increase the uncertainties on this region and the uncertainties of future of the Japan. And all Asia Pacific will raise a very emerging dangerous issue, say, when Japan remilitarized, what does it mean for Japan and for this region as a whole, including the United States? And also, the more active U.S.-Japan military cooperation and activities will strengthen structural contradiction of the so-called security dilemma. That means the more military deployments by U.S. and Japan, the more military actions by U.S. and Japan in this region, the more reactions by the related countries. And then the whole region and the whole parties, including Japan and the U.S., will fall in deeper and deeper of the trap of the security dilemma. That's very irresponsible for the region.
That was Dr. Yang Xiyu from the China Institute of International Studies. That's all the time for this edition of World Today. I'm Ding He in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.